The 2020 Big Ten college football season, especially in the Big Ten, was full of a lot of intrigue. Today we're going to be talking about the Big Ten East 2021 predictions after Indiana had one of their best ever seasons last year in 2020. Remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to see some of my future videos. Also, I made a video about the Big Ten West Division predictions. If you want to check that out, the link will be in my bio. So I'm going to be doing schedule predictions. I'm going to say one thing I like and dislike about each team and list their order of finish. And by the end of it, you will know who is going to Indy in the East, according to me. So let's start off with the worst. You got Michigan State in at 7th place. Their schedule is, I would say, pretty tough. You got a non-conference game at Miami. I think they'll start off with a loss against Northwestern. They'll beat Youngstown State, but at Miami and then hosting a Nebraska team that will get tougher, I think will result in 2 losses. So a 1-3 start for the Spartans before beating Western Kentucky. Then you'll have a 3-game losing stretch against Rutgers, Indiana, Michigan. They'll get their only 2 conference wins against Purdue and Maryland before falling to Ohio State and Penn State in the end. Though that final game against Penn State could be an upset win, another signature upset win for Mel Tucker. Same with the Michigan game as well. My projected finish is 4-8 with a 2-7 conference record, and I think Michigan State's floor, you can't get much lower. I think their floor is 3-9. Don't think you can get much lower than 4-8 with how much they return, and I don't think Mel Tucker is that bad of a coach to let them go into the double-digit losses. Their ceiling isn't too high, though. I think their ceiling here, again, similar to Purdue, is bowling, especially with their tough schedule and the fact that they're in the Big Ten East. One thing I like about Michigan State is Peyton Thorne. I really think that he has solid potential, and I think starting Anthony Russo over him would probably be a grave mistake for the football program. But one thing I don't like is their secondary position and the fact that Mark D'Antonio left this program in a dumpster fire, and I don't think that they necessarily have the talent here or just the culture yet to win. Next up, you got Rutgers in 6th place. Now, Rutgers will finish 5-7, and it will be a better year, again, for Greg Schiano compared to his predecessors. However, again, Big Ten East schedule, they do return starters, but I don't see them going many places. They'll start out 3-0, though, with wins hosting Temple at Syracuse and beating Delaware before falling to Michigan and Ohio State. They'll then beat Michigan State before traveling to Evanston, Illinois, where I think Northwestern will beat them. At Illinois is kind of a toss-up game, but I think Rutgers wins this one behind probably a trick play from Greg Schiano's playbook. And then they will go on a 4-game losing streak against Wisconsin, Indiana, Penn State, and Maryland to finish 5-7 and 2-7 in conference, with a tie-breaking win over Michigan State to give them 6th place. Their floor is the exact same as MSU's. Their ceiling, simply because they don't have a hard non-conference game, is 7-5. It is possible for Greg Schiano to get them to that point, though unlikely. Now we move on to some teams with a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to finishing higher than, per se, like 5th or 4th. You have the Maryland Terrapins, who start off with I'd say a moderately tough non-conference game against West Virginia, which I think will be a win. Maryland here has the talent edge. I think they have the quarterback edge, and home field advantage too, which, despite Maryland not being known for that, home field advantage means means a lot when you do have a full stadium, in all honesty. And I think just those three factors give Maryland a slight edge here to win that game. Howard will be an easy win at Illinois. Could have some issues, but I think Maryland also wins this one. Kent State will be an easy win too. Iowa, though, will be the roadblock in the highway. That will be, I think, probably a blowout against Maryland. Iowa's just a more solid team, better coaching. Don't have the recruiting class, but that really doesn't matter. I think Iowa's coaching and discipline and scheme far outdoes Maryland's here. Maryland will then lose at Ohio State, at Minnesota, hosting Indiana. They'll be 4-4 after starting out 4-0. Strangely enough, I do think they get the upset win against Penn State, though, this year. I think that win last year will give them some confidence heading into this year, and it will give them confidence in this game. After that, Michigan State will upset them, and then Maryland will lose to Michigan before winning at Rutgers, which will be the battle to determine whether Maryland or Rutgers goes bowling. Maryland will be 5th, and they will finish with a 6-6 regular season record with a 3-6 in-conference record. Maryland's floor, like MSU's and Rutgers, is pretty low at 3-9, but their ceiling, mainly because their quarterback and their talent level, and with position coordinator Dan Enos, who many of you have said before, many of my subscribers said is a terrible coach, and he is not a good head coach. He's a questionable OC, but he is proven at developing Tua Tagovailoa, and I think he will develop Talia into being a serviceable weapon in Maryland. And I think that just gives Maryland the good chance here to go bowling, and with their ceiling that they have. And in 4th, this one will surprise many of you. Many of you may be even confused as to why I have Penn State in this position, but in 4th place we have Penn State. I just kind of spoiled it all for you. And I think, and we'll talk about this one and the Michigan placing, last year was really a season where I think the smaller teams all of a sudden realized that Penn State and Michigan, without their home fields and without massive fan support, they're kind of a joke. And it showed in Penn State's 0-5 start. It showed in Michigan's, after the Minnesota game, they just collapsed, didn't win a single home game. And I think Penn State here, you open up against Wisconsin, and what many people don't understand is this Wisconsin game determines their entire season. That's what this Wisconsin game determines. You go at Wisconsin and you win, you'll beat easily a preseason top 25 team, and well, there you got momentum. You'll have good momentum heading into the Auburn game. You'll probably start off 4-0, and then Indiana or at Iowa will be your next real test. But if you lose in Madison and maybe even get bludgeoned in Madison, the whole tone for the season is set differently, because now you can't afford another loss if you want to get to the next level. You beat Ohio State but lose to another team, you have 2 losses, and Ohio State likely is only getting 1 loss. They still get to go to Indy. You lose at Ohio State, you likely aren't beating a top 10 opponent this year and will be again regulated to a New Year's Six Bowl, which you don't even know if you will win that. So just to get right into it, Penn State is going to go at Madison, and I think they're going to lose, and I think it will be somewhere between a close game and a slightly distant game. I don't think a blowout here is possible, and if it is, that should be a major warning sign for Penn State. I think after that, they'll play Ball State, and Ball State is, last year they were really good. They returned a lot of starters this year, and Ball State could be problematic depending on how that Wisconsin game goes, but I think that'll still be a win for Penn State. Franklin's squads are at least semi-solid enough to beat MAC teams for the most part, even after last year's disaster. And another thing I like about Penn State here, the only thing I like is the Mike Yurcich hire. I think Penn State will have a good offense this year. Whether I think that Sean Clifford's a good quarterback or not is a different discussion, but I think he'll utilize what he has well. And Penn State's issues here will likely be against more talented teams, and we'll get to that later. But then Auburn and Villanova will be, I think, easy wins. I don't think Auburn's going to be good. Penn State is probably going to make that a big deal, and we know how Penn State is with crowds. But after that, they're going to be disappointed at home by Indiana. They'll lose on the road to Iowa, and they'll be 3-3. They'll beat Illinois, but then you travel into Columbus, and if they are where they are at 4-3, that game is likely to be an absolute bludgeoning. And this is where I'm going to say what I don't like about Penn State. Their lines are slightly questionable heading into next season, and like the line, like the trenches where I think Penn State will struggle quarterback and trenches, which is exactly the opposite of where Ohio State will struggle. Now, I've mentioned in some of my other videos, Ohio State having the QB situation they have could be like worse than Justin Fields, and likely will be. They won't have an absolute stud quarterback this year, but they'll still have a great quarterback and great lines, and that will be a problem for any team that doesn't have those. And so yeah, what I don't like about Penn State here is they last year kind of proved that they were a momentum-based team, which a lot of teams are, but they fell apart and literally gave up the second that they realized they can't reach Indy before slowly crawling back. And trenches and Clifford's turnover situation is kind of abysmal too. And again, after that, they'll lose to Maryland. As I said, Maryland gets the upset here before Penn State, again, like last year, after starting out with a losing record, will finish modestly strong. They will beat Michigan in Beaver Stadium and take out their frustration again on my Wolverines, and then beat Rutgers and Michigan State to finish 7-5 and 4-5 in conference in fourth place. Penn State's floor is I think 5-7 here, and that may be crazy to sound, but last year, momentum-based team, I just don't like the look of them this year. Don't think they're going to be as big of a bounce-back team as everyone says they will. Their floor is pretty low, and Michigan's is too, so don't think I'm being biased against Penn State here. A lot of the Big Ten East teams' floors are relatively low, but their ceiling is 10-2. They can do what Franklin has done with them before and get a 10-2 regular season finish and finish 11-2 with a New Year's Six Bowl and be right back to where everyone thinks they will. So I could be wrong here, but that's kind of my bold prediction in the East, is that Penn State won't finish in the top 3. And speaking of number 3, you have the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan will start off 4-0. They will beat Western Michigan. They will beat Washington, which many say will be an upset. I don't think so. I think Washington, while they will be good next year, they won't be great, and I think they're being just a tad bit overrated heading into next year. Michigan will beat them. They will then beat NIU and Rutgers before losing on the road to, of course, Wisconsin. After that, Nebraska is who they face, and that could be a trap game, quite possibly, but I think the Wolverines pull it out here. That'll probably be, I'd say, a defensive battle. Both teams have relatively poor offenses, but I think we'll have defensive improvements. Michigan will just etch that one out to be 5-1 before winning against Northwestern and Michigan State. And then you have this rough November stretch in which you host Indiana, you play at Penn State, at Maryland, hosting Ohio State, and they'll likely lose 3 out of 4, at minimum 2 out of 4, I would say. They're going to lose to Indiana, they're going to lose to Penn State, they'll beat Maryland, and they'll be 8-3 3 entering the Ohio State game, and they'll lose that one likely pretty badly. And they'll finish in third place. They'll be 5-4 in conference, and their floor is 6-6, and their ceiling is 11-1, just one higher than Penn State in every category. And they likely won't reach the 11-1 at all. That's very unlikely. That's almost stretching it here. But Michigan next year, I think, has a huge opportunity and will be under great pressure to succeed. And this either blows up and Michigan does really well, or it blows up the other way and Michigan does very poorly, in all honesty. And Michigan here, what I like about them is their staff changes, their recruiting is still good, and I think the change in defensive schemes will help. What I don't like is the head coach, again, can adapt, and just really the quarterback situation and the fact of you really don't have many offensive returning starters. That's not a good place to be in. I just have doubts about Michigan heading into 2021. Next up, you have Indiana, who I have projecting finish at 10-2, and I'm not going to be talking about Indiana much, just because I think they're solid, a great deal solid. They have more wiggle room and just more. I don't really know how to put it here, but they have a better chance to succeed and to not fail than Michigan and Penn State do. There's a shorter margin of error here with Indiana, I believe, and that is just, there's not really much to talk about here. They're going to lose on the road to Iowa in a close game, but I think Iowa has it here before beating Idaho. They will cause Cincinnati's only loss. They'll beat Western Kentucky. They'll beat Penn State at Beaver Stadium, which will give Tom Allen, I think, a signature win at the time. They'll beat Michigan State, and then they will lose in perhaps Ohio State's closest game if they don't get upset by another team in Bloomington, but I think that will be a loss. Ohio State just has the edge in every way, and they have better coaching, better talent. We saw what happened last year too. Indiana played their hearts out and mounted a comeback, and it wasn't enough. But that won't be the end of Indiana's season. They will win out against Maryland, Michigan, Rutgers, Minnesota, and Purdue to finish 10-2 and 7-2 in conference in the regular season to finish second in the Big Ten East. And now you all obviously know who I have in first. But one thing I like about Indiana is Michael Penix Jr. If he is healthy, he is a really good quarterback, and I think that if they keep him healthy, Indiana will certainly get double-digit wins this year. And their defense was very solid last year. The one thing I don't like is without Michael Penix, their offense is absolutely non-existent, and they had trouble running the ball last year. And those are great concerns that need to be addressed this off-season. But I think Tom Allen is a solid coach, and I think that he will continue to have success in Indiana. And after this, you got the Buckeyes. And the Buckeyes are no matter what, they're good. They are not being in Indy this year. They're staying around. They'll probably win likely their however many straight Big Ten titles. It's getting hard to remember here, and I don't want to remember because I'm a Michigan fan. But I have Ohio State. I have them being first in the East, but I do have something shocking that will happen. Ryan Day, I predict, will get his first Big Ten Conference loss in his opener at Minnesota. I think Minnesota here has a strong run game. They'll return to their 2019 ways, improve the defense. Tanner Morgan will again be a close to blue chip QB, and that'll produce some problems for what would be a young Ohio State quarterback, young Ohio State secondary. And I think Ohio State loses this one, but there will be no worries for that because they will beat Oregon, they'll beat Tulsa, and Akron to be 3-1 before the real Big Ten East Conference stretch begins. They'll beat Rutgers, Maryland. They'll have a close one at Indiana, which if they somehow manage to lose that, could end their playoff hopes. But I think they win that game. They'll then beat Penn State easily. Same with Nebraska, Purdue, Michigan State, and finally the annual beatdown in Ann Arbor against Michigan. Ohio State will finish 11-1 in the regular season, 8-1 in conference, and will have their ticket punched to Indy. And in Indy, in my next video, I'll be discussing Ohio State versus Wisconsin. That'll be really an in-depth breakdown of each of those teams' strengths and weaknesses, who I think has the edge over another in certain areas, and who I think wins that game. And you can likely hint already the Buckeyes are likely to win here. But stay tuned for that one. I'm going to make it interesting, lay out some scenarios for how each team could win that game, and so on and so forth. Ohio State's floor is 10-2. That'd be losing to likely Indiana and another team, Minnesota or Oregon, or maybe another small team as well, kind of like what happened in 2017 for Ohio State. And their floor is just going 12-0 regular season and not losing at all, which is, again, completely possible. Ryan Day has not lost a regular season game yet. That's all I have to say for today. If you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and check out my other videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.